Dear students, today we are going to discuss about the importance of Kannada cultural and literary practices. So, let us start this lecture with a quote from a folk poem in Kannada. At break of day, whom do we pray? Mother Earth, who grows our pepper and ginger, let us awhile remember her ever. This is how a folk song in Kannada narrates the connection between belief system of people and the reason of cultural practices. Indeed, every form of art including literature, drama, painting, music, all kinds of creative human expressions are an outcome of activities related to production. Those scholars could trace the antiquity of Kannada literary history dating back to at least 1500 years, but it is difficult to locate the origin of oral literary culture, which began earlier, still runs parallel to the written form. However, the history of Kannada literary practices has not been historically divided absolutely into different time periods. For the convenience of present lecture, I have categorized these period into below phases. Those are Hindana Kala, pre-colonial period, Naduvana Kala, colonial period, Nutana Kala, during nationalism, Prastuta Kala, post-independent period. Kannada, a Dravidian classical language, which is as old Tamil, which is spoken predominantly in the state of Karnataka in India. So, construction of identity of this geo-cultural region called Karnataka, one of the southern states of India, can be traced in the ideological debates among the scholars who tried to create a notion of Kannada identity with different entities. Though in India, generally sense of belongingness is strongly ensured by the language of concerned regions, which is considered as a dominant substance, but taking into account of other entities such as historical, political, religious, geographical and cultural, the literary scholars and historians determine that the existence of Kannada Nadu, its Kannada region, is purely a geographical factor. Professor Madhav Prasad, a scholar, noted that there is no substance in Kannada or Karnataka that guarantees its Kannada identity. It is rather a question of set of identifications. But the question remains unanswered that how the identifications, which often change or transform over a period of time, can shape a particular domain called identity. Let us start with the first point, Hindana Kala, that is how Kannada cultural practices was used to be in this period, the pre-colonial period. Challenging construction of cultural identity of the geocultural region of this southern state, researchers trace the existence of Kannada by looking at Kaviraja Marga, kingly path of poets, a first available 9th century written text in Kannada, a treatise on poetics. At the same time, construction of Kannada literary and cultural identity can be traced in the ideological debates that exist within the possible conditions under the specific social and historical junctions. The writer of Kaviraja Marga illustrates the spread of Karnataka border as Kaverindama Godavari Varamirda Nadada Kannadadol Bhavisida Janapadam Vasudha Valaya Vilina Vishada Vishesha Visham, which means the territory spread over the river Kaveri to Godavari, known as Kannada, and the people, due to their rich culture living in this region, had a special status in the universe. Further, it describes the nature of Kannada people as Kurutodadeyum Kavya Prayoga Parinate Matigal, which means that though they do not know writing and do not engage in literary production, but they could understand and enjoy the epics by listening. In addition, it points out that they are fond of epics. The researchers of Kannada literary history often quote the names of places of Karnataka mentioned in the epics Ramayana and Mahabharata, as there is astonishing difference in estimation of antiquity of Karnataka. But there are scholars who establish it by tracing the empirical evidences such as inscriptions, the ancient texts available in other languages. Karnataka through ages of R.R. Divakar is one among the significant such studies. In the chapter Early Period of Kannada, he writes, "Its Kannada antiquity is next only to that of Sanskrit and Prakrit, and perhaps also of Tamil. The earliest references to the Kannada country and its culture are to be found in the Buddhist chronicles and early Tamil classics. The Mahavamsha tells us that Ashoka, the Maurya emperor, sent Rakkhitha, one of his Buddhist missionaries, to Vanavasa, which is Banavasi present, and Mahadeva, another of them, to Mahishamandala, present Mysore, in the 3rd century BC. Silippadikaram of Ilangoidigal 465 AD refers to a dance of Kannadigas witnessed by the Chera ruler Senaguptan of the 2nd century AD. An illustrative extract ascribed to Avaiyavar of 2nd century AD and quoted in a commentary on Tolkappiyam, the earliest extant work in Tamil, makes a rather uncharitable reference to the Kannada people. The verse says that wise men do not approach these 6: Vadugar, Telugu people; Aruvalar, Tamil tribe; Karunadagar, Kannada people; cremation ground, goblins and buffaloes. So I am unquoting. So it is considered as new trend began with the Ratnatayar, 3 gems of Kannada literature, Pampa, Ponna, Ranna, in the 10th century, where prose and verse were mixed with a Champu style. The 3 poets extensively wrote on episodes from the Ramayana, Mahabharata and Jain legends and biographies. Chavundaraya, Ranna's elder contemporary, then came with an elaborate work on history of all the 24 Jaina Tirthankars, saintly teachers. The Chola king of Tamil Nadu got too aggressive around the 12th century and fought wars. This meant a lean phase in literary activities except for the works of few writers like Nagachandra, known for his Jaina Ramayana, the Jain poetess Kanti, the grammarian Nagavarma II, who wrote Karnataka Bhasha Bhushana in Sanskrit sutras, and Krittivarman and Vrittavilasa. The 12th century saw a sea of change in Kannada literature, both cultural practices, in content and style. What caused this? The growth of Veerashaivism, which was essentially a revolutionary in approach. It de-recognized untouchability and saw women as equals. It liberated Kannada from the clutches of Sanskrit. The moving spirit behind this movement was Basavanna, who was a minister in the court of Prince Bijala. His vachanas, which can be called prose poems, have their mournings in folk literature and folk culture, and yearn to liberate man from the bondage of untruth and ignorance. This is what in one of his vachana he writes, Ivanarava, Ivanarava, Ivanaravanindenisadireya, Ivanammava, Ivanammava, Ivanammavanindenisaraya, Kudala Sangamadeva, Nimma Maneya Maganindenisaya, he writes. They seek to provide happiness here and elsewhere. Allama Prabhu, Akka Mahadevi, Chennabasavanna, Madara Chennaya, Siddharama, Madivala Machaya, Dohara Kakkaya, etc. with other Vachanakaras from the lower castes. And the middle phase of Kannada literature saw the power of Puranic Hinduism over Jainism. A very distinct phase of writing began in the second half of the 12th century in the Veerashaiva phase with Basava's Vachanas. There was a spate of writers like Harihara, Raghavanka and Kereya Padmarasa writing fervently about Shaiva in the 12th and 13th centuries. Rebellion against the orthodox rituals came from the brilliant poetess Akka Mahadevi, a harbinger of Bhakti poetry. The giants too weren't idle all these while. They composed legendary stories of various Tirthankars. In all, the 13th century was chock full with poems, literary criticism, grammar, natural sciences and translations from Sanskrit. After Basavanna, the great influence on Kannada literature was Harihara, who used an innovative form called Ragale. His Basavaraja Devara Ragale and Nambiyannana Ragale are the examples of this genre. His nephew Raghavanka introduced yet another form of poetry called Shatpadi, and apart from Somanatha Charite and Siddharama Charite, and his Harishchandra Kavya is considered to be a masterpiece. The 16th century saw Veerashaiva poets of extraordinary merit. Sarvagna, a Vairagi in that he had no settled home and no religion, wrote Sarvagnana Padagalu in Vachana, songs of Sarvagna style. This work is really a compendium of wit and wisdom. Nijaguna Sivayogi, who was a ruler, saint and scholar, wrote Viveka Chintamani, an encyclopedia in Kannada. Dasakuta, or the Vaishnava movement, was led by Purandara Dasa, who is also considered the father of Carnatic music. Through his Kirtanas, he propounded the Dvaita philosophy and gave an impetus to Bhakti movement. Kanakadasa, though hailing from the Kuruba community, followed in the footsteps of Purandara Dasa. Karnataka culture reached its zenith during the Vijayanagara Empire. Narayanappa's, that is Kumara Vyasa, Karnataka Bharata Kathamanjari or Gadugina Bharata, as it is popularly known, is the finest example of the literature of this period. This was followed by Lakshmisha's Jaimini Bharata, which is also an immensely popular work. Chamarasa's Prabhulinga Lile is another notable work of this period. Post-Renaissance movement saw a 4-line folk meter called Sangatya, which was particularly suitable for singing. Nanjunda Kavi, who wrote Kumara Ramana Kate, proved its multidimensional application, which was Ratnakara Varni, who in Bharatesha Vaibhava explored its full potential. So when we comes to Naduvana Kala, that is Kannolian period, there was a sea change in cultural practices and as well as literary practices in the Kannada Nadu. The Odiyars of Mysore gave a boost to Kannada literature. Particularly noteworthy is Chikkadevaraja Odiyar's period from 1672 to 1704. He himself wrote Chikkadevaraja Binnappa. Tirumalarya's Chikkadevaraja Vijaya has Mysore history as its theme and is in Chempu style. Singaraya's Mitravinda Govinda, translated from Harsha's Ratnavali, is considered to be the earliest Kannada play. Another noteworthy poetess of this period is Sanchi Honnamma, who wrote Hadibadiya Dharma in Sangyata meter. Kannada literature took a strong Hindu bend with the orthodox Vijayanagara kings, 14th and 15th century. Some eminent names were Bhima Kavi, Padmanaka, Mallanayar, Singaraja and Chamarasa. The Bhakti movement also affected Kannada literature in this period. The Ramayana, Mahabharata and Puranas were translated afresh using the folk meters Satpadi and Ragale. Devotional songs of dasas or singing mendicants were compiled, which formed an important part of popular literature. The next 2 centuries were a busy period with many rulers and kingdoms such as Wadayar kings, Bijapur sultans and Mughals that led to much literary activity. Bhatta Kalanka Deva's Karnataka Shabdanushasana on grammar, Shadakshara Deva's romantic Champu, the Rajashekara Vilasa, the historical compositions of the Wadayar period, Nijaguna Yogi's Viveka Chintamani of Shaiva lore, Nanjaraja's Puranic works, the Shaiva Bhakti Mahatyam, and Harivamsha were some of the notable creations of this period. The popular Yakshagana dramatization of Puranic tales with much singing was an innovation of the late 18th century. A good mass of folk poetry thus came to be written. Sishnala Sarif was a saint poet, philosopher and social reformer of this period who composed moral poems in Kannada called Tattvapada form. He is recognized as the first ever Muslim poet in Kannada literature. Sishnala Sarif was known to compose poems as per the situation and sing them to spread the messages across. Though he never penned down his compositions from the word of mouth, quite a few of them have been passed on to the next generations. All his works are in colloquial Kannada language, that is called Dharwad Kannada, which is the northern part of Karnataka. The ideology of Karnataka as a concept of nation in its modern form was a historical development starting from the last decade of the 19th century, elaborated by the intellectuals and historians of the early part of 20th century. By introducing printing machines and print culture into the vernacular languages in Indian states, the Christian missionaries too caused for the spread and growth of Kannada consciousness in Karnataka as well. A systematic historical study of Kannada literature, culture, language and its cultural practices by the Christian missionaries and European scholars as well as Kannada scholars helped Kannadigas to imagine their past and appreciate their cultural awakening. Some scholars termed it as cultural renaissance of Karnataka. So when it comes to another period of Kannada cultural practices, that is Nutana Kala, during nationalism and post-independent period. So during 19th century Western style education, Christian missionaries who depended upon the local language to circularize their gospels and ultimately the arrival of printing press incredibly sped up the development of modern period in Kannada literature. A well-known Christian missionary, Herman Mogling, had published the first ever Kannada newspaper named Mangaluru Samachara. Herman Mogling had published the first ever newspapers as well as Kannada texts. Mogling has also had gone ahead to publish Kannada classics as series referred to Bibliotheca Karnataka during the period of 18th century to end of the 19th century. British officers Benjamin L. Rice and J.H. Fleet also had begun to edit and issue critical editions of surviving literary classics, contemporary folk ballads and inscriptions. The first Kannada English dictionary by Ferdinand Kittel was brought out in 1894. Mummadi Krishnaraja Wadayar continued the tradition of his predecessor. Kempu Narayana's Mudra Manjusa deserves a special mention. Wadayar also started the Raja's English School in the year 1833, and this along with the expansion of missionary activities increased the Western influence on Kannada literature and cultural practices. Chamaraja Wadayar's period saw a new era in Kannada literature. M.S. Puttana's Madidunnu Maraya, D.V. Venkatachalaya and Dr. B.V. Venkateshesha's detective stories like Parimala and Arindamana Sahasagalu, Galaganatha's social and historical novels, Kittle's dictionary, Vasudevarya's Balabhode belong to this period. Mudrana's Ramashvamedha is an epic episode in prose. This has a tinge of modern writing. Translated novels by B. Venkatacharya and Galaganatha, mostly historical, made a deep impact on readers. In the year 1921, Professor B. M. Srikantaya heralded the Navodaya movement, which is Renaissance period of Kannada cultural and literary practices. His English Geetagalu was a free rendering of some great English poems. Around this period, and unknown to him, K.V. Puttappa, known as Kuvempu, had switched over from English writing to Kannada, and culmination of his work was Sri Ramayana Darshanam, which is a Gnanapith award-winning text written in blank verse. Puttappa's social novels such as Kanuru Subbamma Hegadati and Malegalalli Madumagalu are equally well acclaimed. Among the works of this 30s, D.V. Gundappa's Mankutimana Kagga stands out as a zevel. It is considered to be unique in the sense that it contains ethical principles, philosophic truths and experiences of life. Samsa wrote many plays in Halegannada, of which Vigada Vikramaraya is the best example. Another important factor influencing 20th century Kannada literature and culture is that Kannada speaking areas were distributed among different regions such as Chennai, Mumbai, Hyderabad and Mysore provinces in the first half of this century. Only in 1956 were predominantly Kannada speaking areas united to form the present Karnataka state. Till then, many writers felt that failure to bring the Karnataka speaking areas under one state administration led to the lack of identity of the Kannadigas. Therefore, in Karnataka, the freedom struggle meant not only freeing India from the British, but also freeing Kannada speaking areas from the rulers of Tamilians, Telugus and Marathas. Discovering and propagating the best of Kannada literature of the past and present were the ways of unifying the Kannada speaking people and helping them find their cultural identity. B. M. Srikantaya, Aluru Venkatarao and their disciples spent a considerable number of years touring different parts of Kannada speaking areas and lecturing about Kannada language and culture. Thus, Kannada language and culture became important instruments in making people aware of their identity and helping them regain their self-respect during the freedom struggle. Modern education made a late entry in Karnataka as compared to other parts of India. Works based on Sanskrit models like Shakuntala of Basavappa Shastri continued till the late 19th century with a little invitation from the Christian missionaries. The Academy of Kannada Literature was set up in Bangalore in the year 1914. Gradually, modern literature gained tempo and translations were made from English, Bengali and Marathi. Kerur and Galaganatha attempted the first novels in Kannada, followed by a host of novelists like Shivarama Karanta, K.V. Puttappa, G.P. Rajaratnam, Basavaraj Kattimani, Nanjanagudu Tirumalamba, the first major women writer in modern Kannada, and others. K.S. Narasimha Swami's Mysuru Mallige, a collection of poems with love and separation, as the theme is a landmark of Navodaya period. G.P. Rajaratnam's Ratnan Padgalu perhaps stands unique in the world of literature in seeing truth or beauty in drunken man's gay gibberish. Puthi Narasimhacharya's Gokula Nirgamana has Krishna's separation from Radha as its theme, and this again reaches spiritual heights. Goruru Ramasamy Iyengar chose the easy form to portray the life of rural Karnataka. His Halliya Chitragalu is considered the supreme example of his writings. His tradition was continued by A.N. Murthy Rao in Hagaluganasugalu and M.R. Srinivas Murthy in Rangannana Kanasina Dinagalu. The period also saw a spurt of literary criticism of these. T.N. Srikantaya's Bharatiya Kavya Mimamsa is considered to be a classic. A.R. Krishnashastri nurtured a whole generation of writers through Prabuddha Karnataka, a periodical brought out by the Kannada Sangha of the Central College and later shifted publication to Mysore University. S.V. Ranganna, an English professor who had by this time established himself as a Kannada writer through Rangabinnappa, wrote on literary criticism in Shaili and Ruchi. V. Sita Ramaya's output varied from Hana Prapancha, an economic treatise, to Pampayatre, a travelogue. To host of writings from poetry to literary criticism, R.S. Mugli wrote Kannada Sahitya Charitre, succinct and balanced history of Kannada literature. The short story too made its advent with Panja Mangeshwara Rao and Masti Venkatesh Iyengar. A new trend in drama began with the use of colloquial language. Poetry too wasn't left behind. B.M. Srikantaya took Kannada poetry to great heights with innovations like the blank verse. Literature in Kannada today is a big enterprise. With bustling centers like University of Mysore, the Karnataka University Dharwad and Kannada Sahitya Parishad of Mysore. As the Navodaya period mounted towards its summit, the Pragatishila progressive movement headed by novelist A.N. Krishna Rao, also recognized as Anakru, gathered up considerable thirst in the early 1940s. This school primarily inclined towards being a leftist, debated that literature must serve as a tool of social revolution, considered the Navodaya to be the result of aesthetics too straight-laced to be of any social significance. During the 1950s, even as the Pragatishila integrated back into the Navodaya stream of thought, yet another new modernist school of writing named Navya came forth, as if in a cyclic motion, though formally ushered in by V.K. Gokak, Vinayaka Krishna Gokak, a major writer of Kannada and English languages, winner of Jnanpith Award, with his Navya Kavitegalu, modern poems in 1950. In reality, it was Gopala Krishna Adiga who best illustrated the distinctive spirit of the movement. Poetry and later the short story became the most efficient and valuable medium of expression of the Navya movement, always considered an integral part in modern period of Kannada literature. The most spectacular and extravagant in a symbolic sense playwrights from the modern period in Kannada literature include Girish Karnad, P. Lankesh, Chandrasekhar Kambara, Chandrasekhar Patil, H.S. Shivprakash. Girish Karnad's Tugalak successfully tries to delineate brutality included by idealism gone off beam. It is interesting to note that except U.R. Ananthamurthy and Girish Karnad, all of the 5 of the 7 Jnanpith awardees in Kannada, Kuvempu, Dara Bendre, Shivaram Karanth, Masti Venkatesh Iyengar and V.K. Gokak have been writing since the Navodaya period. Dara Bendre won the award primarily for Nakutanti, a metaphysical poetic work, but his popularity is based more on his writings drawn from folk culture. Shivaram Karantha's writings range from encyclopedia to novels, essays, drama, poetry. Marali Mannige is oft-mentioned novel, but Bettada Jiva, Chomanadudi and Mookajjiya Kanasagalu are also noteworthy. His works mirror the cultural ethos of Dakshina Kannada. Masti Venkatesh Iyengar is primarily noted as short story writer. His Channabasava Nayaka and Chikadev Rajendra are historical novels dealing with degeneration of monarchy. And Subbana is a long story which reaches metaphysical heights. Vikru Gokak began as a Navodaya poet, but his magnum opus is Bharata Sindhu Rasmi, which seeks to find answer for the modern man's dilemma in ancient epics. Significantly, Anantamurthi's Bhava also seeks inspiration from traditional wisdom. As earlier moments failed to address the different issues in their writing, the oppressed groups such as lower castes, Muslims and women started coming into the different forms of creative expression that led entire Kannada cultural sphere to undergo a kind of vibrancy for the first time in its history. Dalit and Bandaya are the two most social and literary radical movements in the mid-1970s in Karnataka. Dalit writers are mostly from untouchable castes. Bandaya is the movement of young leftist writers. Both schools of writing had expressed anger towards several forms of social and economic exploitation. So Karnataka has a rich heritage of art and culture. From time immemorial, this place has been the origin and the culmination ground of Indian classical music and other forms of arts. Folk culture has its roots in this state, and the art forms have heavily borrowed from them. By utilizing the medium of performing arts, artists convey the various traditions and customs of a particular community. Stories from epics are also portrayed on stage. The performances are eye candy because of the vibrant costumes and makeup. Narrators are an inseparable part of these performances. Performing arts have always been a medium to educate people. Through these art forms, twin purpose of education and entertainment was achieved. So let us look at the different folk dances of Karnataka. So Yakshagana, it's a one of those art forms that is rooted in mythologies. In Hindu mythology, Yakshas are depicted as demigods who attend to Kubera. This dance drama elaborately portrays the stories from holy texts. A trip to coastal Karnataka is incomplete without watching Yakshagana. Uttara Kannada, Shivamogga, Udupi, Dakshina Kannada are the places where this dance form is performed. Yakshagana is a unique combination of dance, drama, dialogues, songs, music, resplendent costumes. This dance drama is performed in open-air theatres where audiences are seated on three sides of the stages. So when it comes to Togolu Gombe Ata, it's a puppetry show. Togolu Gombe Ata is a puppet show that is quite popular in Karnataka. In this ancient art form, leather puppets are used to enact popular scenes from epics such as Ramayana, Mahabharata. In a world where puppet shows are fast disappearing this age, old art forms is quite popular in this Indian state. Such shows were performed to ward off the evil powers that bring diseases, epidemics and destroyed crops. Yeah, Bhuta Aradhane. Bhuta Aradhane is a ritualistic dance in Karnataka. The origin of this art form can be traced to coastal parts of Karnataka and Kerala. This is a way of Tulu worship. This form of folk dance is unique to Karnataka. Bhuta in India refers to ghost. The references to these creatures are found in legends and myths. These creatures are Lord Shiva's attendants and known as Bhuta Ganas. Bhuta Aradhane is an extension of this worship. When we look at the Nagamandala, snakes have always mystified people. In India, snake is seen to accompany Lord Shiva and he is thus considered holy enough to worship. Nagamandala is a folk art of worshipping snakes and is prevalent in Dakshina Kannada and Udupi. The beats and movements of the dance are quite attention grabbing. While worshipping the serpent, the dance too depicts the slithering movements of the snake. This exotic performance is a treat to watch as the dancers are dressed up like serpents. Fear and ignorance about snakes also play a major part in this worship. Dollu Kunita. This is also drum dance that is quite popular in Karnataka. Dollu Kunita is accompanied by singing. This is performed by men of shepherd community, that is Kurba. Strong acrobatic movements, drumming and synchronization are the features of this performing arts. Other than this, there is another ritualistic dance called the Puja Kunita. There are very few dances that are accompanied only by instruments. Puja Kunita is thus unique in its own way. Karadi Majalu. This is a popular form orchestra of North Karnataka region. It is performed during various auspicious occasions and in processions. The Karadi or Karade is a percussion instrument that is used in the orchestra. It is a palm-sized cymbal that produces metallic sounds which the Shehnai is used to produce the melody. Krishna Parijata is a folk theatre that depicts legends revolving around Lord Krishna and Indra. Though there are many theories related to Krishna Parijata, but the most popular one is that of Krishna waging war over Indra. The two lords fell out over Parijata tree that came out of the ocean of existence. The entire chain of events is performed through this dance drama. Then Jaggalige Kunita. This is a folk art of the Hubballi Dharwad region, particularly of the Bayhatti village. It is performed on occasions such as Yugadi and Holi. Jaggalige is essentially a percussion instrument made of a bullock cart wheel with buffalo hides wrapped around. On the said occasion, the village folk roll out the giant instruments and march in an impressive procession. The entire performance is directed by a chief choreographer who himself uses a much smaller percussion instrument called the Kanihaligi, which is made of clay and covered with calf hide. The performance usually involves a group of about 15 people. Then Bullock Atta. This is performed by the Kodava men in front of an oil lamp in an open field. The men hold the Chavari yakfur in one hand and the Kodava short sword Odikkatti in the other while performing this dance. Many regional variations of this dance exist. Sometimes performers dance only with the Chavari without the use of the short sword. When the short sword or the Odikkatti is also used, it is called Kattiyata. The Dudi and hourglass shaped drum is used to provide the rhythm for the dance. Then Viragase. It is a dance form prevalent in the state of Karnataka. It is a vigorous dance based on Hindu mythology and involves very intense energy sapping dance movements. Viragase is one of the dances demonstrated in the Dasara procession held in Mysore. This dance is performed during festivals and mainly in the Hindu months of Shravana and Kartika. Hagalu Veshagararu, day actors. Hagalu Veshagararu are a group of itinerant actors of Karnataka. Some populations of these artists are native to Andhra Pradesh also. These artists are masters of the art of miming and their performance are extempore. No formal stage or facility is used. The artists move from place to place and pitch in tents in places where they offer to perform their show. So when it comes to classical dances of Karnataka, there are various forms of dances like Bharatanatyam, Mysore, Kuchipudi, etc. are the main classical dances here. Most of these dances are still learned by people with great zest. All these dances have different music, beat, movements, themes and costumes.
Januta takita januta bagada panida padani taga bagada ni taga dani 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 da padani da baga baga bada ni dani dani da taga bagada tam takita dani dani da tan takita baga bada bada ni dani dani maduram hasitam madhuram adharam madhuram vadanam madhuram nayanam madhuram hasitam madhuram hridayam madhuram gamanam madhuram madhuradipate akhilam madhuram
Some of the biggest names in Indian dance hail from these schools of dancing. Let us see at the flora and fauna of the state. In Karnataka, the wildlife is well taken care of. This is the reason why animal world is at its best in the state. For animal lovers, this is the best place to be. The dense forest combined with the blessing river of Kaveri has helped the wildlife to grow in Karnataka. In certain places, the common men too look after the well-being of the animals. Such factors have helped Karnataka to promote its wildlife as a part of tourism. People from all over the globe drop in with a desire to catch a glimpse of lurking tiger, jumping cheetah, Indian bison, rare species of birds and numerous other animals. Flora and fauna of Karnataka is like a multi-cushioned platter. The wide range of flora and fauna in Karnataka are indeed a source of delight for the tourists. The geography here boasts of a wide variety of flora and fauna that are spread throughout its length and breadth. And also, one can find many varieties of mammals, birds, a wide range of insects, fishes, amphibians, reptiles, etc. Let us see the history of architecture in the state. The state of Karnataka is renowned for the plethora of Hindu, Muslim, Jain, colonial architectures. It has rich and varied architecture. The three cities of Gulbarga, Bijapur and Bidar is the north have many structures reflecting South Indian Islamic architecture. Among them, Bijapur has a lot worth seeing and is referred to as the Agra of South India. Karnataka is also a chief Hindu cultural center of the 18th century. Aihole and Badami in the north of the state was the center of construction activities during the Middle Ages. The various dynasties that had ruled Karnataka have left their imprint in the architectural styles of the buildings and monuments. Structures were built by the early Chalukyas in the 6th and 8th centuries. The later Chalukyas built temples that were a blend of north and south styles with a star-shaped plan. It is referred to as the Chalukya style. Later, the Hoysalas also developed the in-between style of architecture. The three temples in Beluru, Halebeedu and Somnathpura sport the star plan and have highly decorated walls with exquisite engravings. Jain temples were built on the west coast. Colonial architecture is scattered in the city of Mysore. Some of the exquisite monuments of Hampi reflect a brilliant blend of Hindu-Islamic style of architecture. The Ramachandra temple of Hampi is in the heart of the palace grounds and is called Hazara Rama. It was a medium-sized prayer house of the royals. The temple plan is the same as the later Chalukya type square mandapa with a three-sided entrance. The Vimana reflects the southern style and decorations on it are harmonious. The Vittala temple is the greatest of Vijayanagara architecture. Let us see the trends and history of the Kannada cinema, which is known today as Sandalwood cinema. The films made in Kannada language comes from what is known as Sandalwood film industry, just as Hindi films emerged from Bollywood. While most of the films are made in Kannada, there are few exceptions to films being made in Konkani and Tulu, making Kannada cinema an important aspect of Indian cinema. The most noted actor to emerge from Kannada films was Dr. Rajkumar. He was well known for his captivating voice and versatile acting abilities. Others who have received many accolades include Vishnuvardhan, Gubbi Veeranna, Balakrishna, Puttanna Kanagal, Prabhakar, Lokesh, Anantanag, Girish Karnad, Manjula, Ravichandran, Narasimha Raju and Dwarakesh. Kannada cinema has lost many of its most talented stars on grounds of different reasons, such as accidents and people fading off screen, such as Saundarya, Kalpana, Manjula, Sunil and others. However, due to the lack of studios and technical crews, financiers backed away from film projects in the early stages of Kannada cinema. Satya Sulochana, released in the 1934, has the credit of being the first talkie film in Kannada. The 1950s saw the emergence of Rajkumar. He formed a partnership with two others to produce more Kannada films, but the partnership lasted for a few years before withering away. Most films during this era revolved around mythology and historic events. The golden period of Kannada cinema was seen during 1970s and 80s, where along with Bengali and Malayalam cinema, the emergence of parallel cinema took place in Kannada cinema as well. Films like Kadu, Samskara, Hamsagite, Ondanondu Kaladalli, Chomanadudi were some of the important films to emerge from this era. Girish Kasarvalli is considered to be the pioneer behind new wave cinema in Karnataka. He has won the national award for best film for five times, with the government of Karnataka in 1980s awarding a 50% tax exempt fee for films made in all its entirely in Karnataka. More interest was generated, bringing in much needed revenue into Kannada film industry. Gubbi Veeranna could be considered the doyen of Kannada cinema during the mid to late 40s. He brought his talent as an actor from the theatrical theatrical stage to Kannada cinema through his Gubbi Veeranna Theatre. From the mid-stories to late 50s Gubbi Karnataka Productions, of which he was shareholder, produced movies such as Bhakta Kumbara, Gunasagari, Hemareddy Mallamma, Adarsha Sati and Sadarame. The 1970s and 80s also witnessed the rise of director Puttanna Kangal. His movies such as Belli Moda, Gejje Pooje, Sharapanjara, Sakshatkara and Nagarahavu pioneered a new style of filmmaking which acted as a bridge between commercial and parallel cinema. In the 1980s, in a bid to popularize filmmaking, the government of Karnataka granted a 50% tax exemption to Kannada films completely made in Karnataka. The late 1970s were Rajkumar's peak period. He gave blockbuster movies which created history and established the Kannada film industry on a firm footing. Bangarada Manusha, Dari Tappida Maga, Mayura, Premada Kanike, Babburu Vahana, Bhakta Kumbara and Krishna Devaraya were successful that gave Rajkumar an iconic status. Shankar Nag made his own mark with the internationally acclaimed Ondanondu Kaladalli and Malgudi Days, the movie based on novel of R.K. Narayan, along with several commercial hits. Anant Nag, Ambarish, Lokesh, Ashok, Srinath, MP Shankar and Sundar Krishna Aras were other actors who made their own mark in the industry. Let us conclude this lecture with few questions and doubts. That is a tentative conclusion. Unfortunately, even though Kannada society has contributed some of the great thinkers and philosophers to the Indian philosophy, but there is a complete silent what maintained as for the contribution of lower caste indigenous yogis is concerned. Especially during the 19th century, they had to lose the battle where the old view of upper caste as social hierarchy was continued. 1. Apparently, the whole cultural or literary history of Kannada had been studied merely either considering text, author or religion as a base. As D.R. Nagaraj points out that in this period, the anti-caste social philosophy became the official slogan of Indian nationalism, but it was unable to address complex caste factors in different spheres that led other kind of social race in the later period. He writes, as the very cultural paradigm of the nationalist epoch did not accept the lower caste cosmologies. So, with these different points, let us conclude this lecture with the doubts and the questions in a tentative conclusion. Thank you.